Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's great to see you all here. Can everybody hear me okay? Perfect. Well, that was a fantastic keynote. I'm glad he did a lot of the heavy lifting for me, so hopefully this is a little less stressful if you're not too familiar with AI. But welcome. This is the AI Horizon at WSU. I am Corby Redington. I'm an applications training specialist at Wichita State University. And I guess we'll just get started. So first off, it's nice to meet all of you. This is my first Czech conference. I'm a first-time attendee and presenter, so please be kind, no heckling. Or if you must heckle, do it kindly. I am a technology trainer for student information systems, so that includes Banner, our course leaf products, our reporting platform, which is built in IBM Cognos. And from time to time, I get to work on more exciting projects like generative AI. I am also a continuing undergraduate student. I'm completing a Bachelor of English, which is an interesting field to be in as all of these large language models and generative AI tools are coming onto the scene and kind of impacting how we learn not just language, but anything that's more humanities oriented. And I am an AI enthusiast, and I put that in quotes because sometimes AI is really, really exciting, and other times it just scares the bejesus out of me. And I'm sure you guys can relate if you've had any time to really play around with those tools and see how they might fit into your organizations. So today we are going to talk about a lot of things. It's going to probably be more broad than the last talk from our keynote speaker. I will have a bit of an AI timeline just so you guys know kind of the context that I'm working within. Definitely am not going to go as far back as our last speaker did. And we'll look at what that project looks like at WSU and how our work fits into that timeline. And we're also going to talk about the things that are still on the horizon, because there is a lot still on the horizon. If anybody watched any of the announcements that came out of OpenAI on Tuesday and saw the GPT-4 Omni model being released, that's a huge, huge task for all of us in the coming months as that rolls out. And then because I have a captive audience, I'll probably share some of my opinion as a student and as a tech trainer and as someone who's not in a position of authority to make any decisions. So if any of you are in positions of authority, hopefully I can impact some of the things you're doing at your institutions, and I hope to leave some time for questions at the end. So I timed this out last week and a few days ago, so we should have some time for questions. But looking at our timeline, really for our purposes, our timeline is going to start November of 2022, and that's when the first chat-based generative AI model became available for public usage. That's when OpenAI released that ChatGPT 3.5 model to the public. And then within 6 months, there was a wave of innovation that followed. So OpenAI released their ChatGPT 4 model with a lot of improvements, and Anthropic released Claude, Google released Bard, Adobe threw their hat into the ring with image generation with the Adobe Firefly beta. And then Microsoft also announced their own AI assistant in the form of 365 Copilot. And then a few months later, Anthology provided AI course design features in the Blackboard Learn environment. So whether we really wanted it or not, they gave our instructors AI capabilities and just said kind of run with it. And a month later, the State of Kansas Office of Information Technology Services released their own AI policy. And if any of you guys have had a chance to look at it, it's not very long. I think it's under 2 pages. And it's also not very restrictive compared to some other actions that have been taken by government organizations. So it gave us a lot of room to kind of work within and see what worked on our campus. So by December of last year, our CIO, Ken Harmon, saw a very clear need as all of these technologies were making their way into our digital landscape. And so talks started to happen with some people higher up than I am about what does the resource look like? What is the message that we're going to be sending to our people? And how do we make sure that we're not contradicting the other areas and the other interests on our campus? So after we all came back from winter break, we had initial meetings, we started drafting our resource, we revised it, we ran it up the flagpole and made sure that everyone could sign off and kind of have their say. And by April, of 2024, we published our site. We published the resource in the form of a SharePoint site. There are some reasons why we did that, and I'll get into those as we get closer to seeing what that site looks like. And we had conversations within our division of finance and administration with the vice president who our RCIO reports to, and all of the direct reports under him to propagate that message and make sure that it was done consistently and in a way that was well received, and not just blown off, because it's easy to blow off some of those messages, especially when it's about exciting things like policy. So that brings us to May, where we're actively having conversations with our ITS teams and other teams across our finance and administration division. And then, of course, 2 days ago, OpenAI released their ChatGPT-4 Omni flagship model, and that's kind of gonna shake everything up. So with all of that in mind, I know it's a limited timeline compared to what our previous speaker had talked about, but that brings us to the need. And it really started with all the conversations that were already happening. So we have a lot of innovation that happens on our campus. We have researchers that are participating in national consortiums, and most of the conversations that we've had really are just about faculty and students. And our CIO saw very clearly that staff were left out. We were either left to our own devices or just given kind of lazy blanket, do this or don't do this. So after identifying that absence of staff involvement in the conversations, we also recognize that whether we want or not, everyone is getting access to generative AI at an enterprise level through Microsoft Copilot. That's just being pushed out into our environment. And while that is kind of ubiquitous now on our campus, not everybody knew about it. And so lots of generative AI solutions were being advertised either from OpenAI or from other tech companies. There's things like Scribe and Otter AI that people were paying for. We had some finance folks that were seeing all of the charges on university credit cards to companies that provided what they called secure business-based solutions, but we're just taking them at their word. And so in light of budget limitations and the restrictions that I think every institution faces, we really recognize that unrestricted or uninformed purchasing of this technology may be wasteful, and we really don't have the ability to restrict it, so we have a responsibility to inform that purchasing. And that was really the crux of this project. So while there are a lot of faculty opinions and things about academic integrity and what does AI in the classroom look like, it was not the primary focus on this resource. And so that brings us to our message. And there were lots of potential things we wanted to include in that message, but we wanted to make it approachable more than anything else. While we would like it to be comprehensive, it takes time to build that comprehensive message. So the first question that we wanted to answer with our message is, what does responsible use of generative AI look like? And what is the risk? And there are lots of answers to this question, and I don't really have that answer just yet because of how new the technology is and not necessarily how slow the adoption is, but it takes time to get everybody on board. Another question that we wanted to answer with our message is, what tools are already available? So Microsoft Copilot was in everyone's pocket whether they knew it or not. And a lot of people who use the Adobe Creative Cloud suite on our campus were also getting image-based AI in the form of Adobe Firefly. We also wanted to answer the question of, where do I go if I want to buy a generative AI tool? We didn't want to restrict that purchasing or create a culture of secrecy where everyone's like, well, the VP of Finance and Admin is going to say no, so I need to find a way around that. We wanted to legitimize the use of those tools. And we also wanted to provide a resource for people who are asking, where can I learn more about the technology? Because there's lots of places they can look, but we want to make sure they're looking at quality sources and that the message they're receiving is in accordance with the university's policy. And finally, for ourselves, there were two questions that we wanted to answer, which is, how are our people using generative AI? And we want to ask that of them in a way that isn't judgmental or restrictive. And we also wanted to ask of them, what more can we do to help spread a message of ethical use of this tool? So we had crafted our message, we hit the road, and immediately we ran into some speed bumps, as you might expect. And by far the biggest has been ownership. AI is not a single service. It is not a single application. It is a whole class of technology, and it's one that I think many of us have approached, but we're not very comfortable handling and owning. And we still haven't solved that. I think right now I am the closest thing to an owner on this project, and that's not good because I don't have any direct reports. I don't really have any authority to steer that project. So if you are a leader at your institution and you're beginning to work on this, be ready to own it. Another huge speed bump that I think everyone's going to run into is just fear of the unknown. Because we can look at, product demos from OpenAI or Microsoft or Adobe, and in those demos everything looks great because, as our last speaker said, a lot of them are canned. And we definitely saw that with some of the demos that we got from like Microsoft, for example. But that fear of the unknown is definitely something that keeps your average end user from engaging or even learning about what these technologies can do, good or bad. Another speed bump is just different levels of proficiency. We have people that are really quick with it and really smart. One of the attendees, I know Dave Sprinkle over there, he has been engineering some great prompts that I've been showing to some of our IT teams. And as great as they are, it's miles ahead of what the average person is doing on our campus. So it's a challenge to enable those folks to keep running with it, but also make sure we're not leaving the people behind that haven't touched that tool a day in their lives. And kind of with that different level of proficiency, there is difficulty keeping up with the rapid advancement. I feel like we just kind of got our handle on, the GPT-4 model and Copilot and kind of the status quo. And 2 days ago, all of that changed. I saw the GPT-4 Omni unveiling, and I was like, well, crap, that just kind of throws everything out the window. We really have to continuously rethink our approach because these tools are being continuously rethought by, engineers and companies that are selling them to us. And a final hurdle or speed bump was just limited examples of successful implementation elsewhere. And I don't really know what successful implementation means. I have an idea of what it might look like, but every institution is different, the needs are different, and the risks are different to a certain extent. But we're all kind of in the same boat because I don't think any of us really are there yet. We are kind of stuck being our own example of success. So more than anything, I will tell you from being kind of a solo worker or one of the few workers on this project, it does take a village. If conversations are happening on your campus and there's just a few people, that's not enough. It definitely takes collaboration. And so in our process, we have worked with our CIO, our CISO, our Chief Data Officer, our Chief Privacy Officer, and our Chief HR Officer to make sure that all of our messaging is relevant and that the appropriate guardrails are in place for staff use. We have people on the faculty side that are already doing that when it comes to academic integrity and student use. But for staff, we really wanted to make sure that no one's, going to go put WSU financial information into some free model, and then, who knows where that ends up. And paired with that, we do have collaboration with our Media Resources Center and the Office of Instructional Resources within that group to ensure that there aren't any contradictions with our message to our instructors and our students. While our site is kind of a one-stop shop, it does not focus as much on the faculty resources, and they're just starting now to pay attention to what's out there. So it's going to take a lot more work and a lot more villagers to realize that vision. More than anything else, I can just tell you, keep everyone in the loop. If you think someone really doesn't need to be involved, ask them, because they probably have opinions. They may have used the technology. They might have a comfort level that becomes an asset for you, or they might have some experience that really ties into how these technologies impact your operations on a daily basis or at an institutional level. and also build a silo-free zone. It's easy with these technologies to feel like we are all kind of in our own silo, and that if you're not an AI researcher or you're not a programmer or an expert in machine learning, that you don't have a place at the table, but you definitely do. I'm not a programmer, I'm not an AI researcher, and I have had my nose up against this for the past 6 months, and it's been really enlightening and really frightening, but it takes more people from every background to be a part of that process. And that brings us to our work in progress. It is definitely not finished, and I wouldn't be surprised if it ever, if it never gets finished. But as we worked on our resource, we first researched approaches that other universities have taken. Harvard University has a lot of great web resources out there. Georgetown is another one that we looked at, but we kind of wanted to emulate stuff that worked, stuff that felt clean from an end user perspective and wasn't too complicated, but was also detailed enough so that you weren't just putting some fluff up on a web page to deflect from the hard conversation with your end users. So we created a single entry point for all things generative AI, and before all of you type in that web address, wichita.edu/AI, it is right now limited just to our WSU users, so if you try to go there, you will encounter a login screen, and you may or may not be able to get past it, depending on your affiliation. Fear not, I will show you in just a minute what that looks like if you're not at WSU, and if you are at WSU, you should have already seen this. So, and within this resource, we wanted to really hit 4 things. The first, and probably the most important, is our policy and best practices. We wanted it to be easy for people who had questions to find that information and not have to sift through the full, WSU policies and procedures manual with its 20 some odd chapters, or to have a smattering of web pages that felt disorganized. We also wanted to showcase our available generative AI tools so that people knew there were resources available. So those are Copilot and Firefly. There may be others. We don't have Blackboard out there because Blackboard isn't primarily an AI resource, although it does have AI functionality baked into it now. We also wanted to provide some learning opportunities so that people who are unfamiliar actually have an entry point and can begin building that familiarity and hopefully start trying it out in their roles. And finally, some frequently asked questions that answer things like, what is AI? What is a large language model? What's a hallucination in this context? And we do plan to build around these, but if nothing else, I think this is a great starting point for what other institutions can publish if you haven't begun doing so. And as we've been building that site, we've been engaging in conversations with leaders across campus to raise awareness of it. While it is, I'm very proud of the resource, but it hasn't been used as much as I would like, and I think part of that is just because it's hard to approach if you haven't had a conversation with a real human about it who can actually tell you what they think and what they feel instead of, just repeating the same selling points that Microsoft and Adobe are telling us. So with that, the last thing that I wanted to point out with our work in progress is sharing with other institutions, and that brings us to our little demo. Can all of you see that? Nope, you can't. Let me see if I can. There we go. So part of why we chose a SharePoint site, which kind of restricts you guys, is because we have lots of other resources that are built in SharePoint, and we're starting to push some similarity onto our users in terms of the environment. Part of that is just to increase comfort and also trust of our messages. I'm a huge believer that your messages are more trustworthy when they're delivered in a consistent style, and so there's a lot of design stuff that goes into this that isn't necessarily, IT stuff. But we have a resource that we've been building for our ITS area that has lots of stuff about our software. And so I wanted to use a similar approach when it came to generative AI. And so this is what we kind of landed on. We have just your generic landing page, and then pointing out our guidelines, our tools, and our learning opportunities. One speed bump that I mentioned earlier is ownership, and because of that, all of our contact us links just redirect to the pages that they're on because we don't know who they should be contacting when they have suggestions or questions. So that ownership piece, I can't stress enough. Leaders have to be unafraid to lead when it comes to this tool. So beyond that, our guidelines, a huge reason that we are having these conversations with different areas is this is a lot of text. And I don't know how many people want to come out here and read all of this. And so it helps to have another personal touch on that. And really, more than anything, what we're pointing out is our privacy and our data security concerns. We're pointing to internal policy. I'm not the one who sets the policy, so again, leaders need to lead and need to set policy. So whoever's making your resources can point to it instead of just giving a response, well, I think our CIO will be okay with this, and I think our VP of admin and finance will be okay with this. And paired with those guidelines, because we want it to be a one-stop shop, we have also added some of our faculty guidelines. And while we're starting to get some criticism, perhaps, from members of Faculty Senate about what is here and what is advised, that is to be expected and it's to be welcomed because they also need to have a seat at this table. So beyond our guidelines, we wanted to provide access to the WSU tools that are available. And while we only have two tools in the kit right now, they're both pretty powerful. And in addition, we wanted to provide that avenue of what do people do if they want to shop around? If they want to use something for research or teaching that we don't actually provide, how can they actually do that? And who do they contact? Right now, really the only oversight that we have is our data management committee, and I'm sure that the answer they'll give to everyone who contacts them about purchasing a tool is no. But we've at least opened that pathway for them to, say no. And within our tools, we wanted to give as many resources as possible for how do we use it, how do we approach it. Part of that is training opportunities. This is probably the only bespoke training opportunity that we've made for an AI tool, which the fabulous Allie Levine, who's presenting later today, has made this video for us, which I won't play because it's 20 minutes long and we don't have that kind of time. But if nothing else, just throw them a little bit of a bone. Your end users probably don't know all of the things that we're talking about today, so spell them out and don't think that it's overkill to spell those things out. So in addition to our AI tools, we wanted to provide some learning opportunities as best we can, and some of those are coming from the Academic Resources Conference that we hold 3 times a year. We really don't have a lot because it takes a lot of time to build those training resources, and as soon as we have it finished, we're going to see advancements that just make it irrelevant, like with the release of the ChatGPT-4 Omni model. But there are good resources out there from like Microsoft Cloud that we've pointed to, or from Google Cloud. And so even just going out there, finding good resources from other companies that are trustworthy is a good step if you don't have the time or the people or the budget to make resources specific to your institution from scratch. And then as kind of our last catch-all, we have an FAQ page that answers some of the more basic questions, like what is artificial intelligence, and points to external opinions or authorities on some of these topics. So how does generative AI differ from your regular old AI? What's a large language model? What's a hallucination? As well as some kind of more faculty-catered things like, do we recommend AI detection tools, which the short answer is no, because of the risks it can present with intellectual property rights and privacy rights of students. And that's really it. There's not much more to it than that right now, and it may not look like it took months to build that, but it really did. It took a lot of iteration and collaboration just to make sure that all of the messaging therein was relevant and correct and didn't open us up to some sort of risk by giving advice that wasn't kosher. So, come on. So in that respect, what is still on the horizon? Hopefully some great ideas. We do need to keep thinking about this tool or these tools and how they fit into our digital landscapes. So more conversations are going to be happening across campus with our ITS department. So I think next week or the week after, I'm talking to our networking and telecom team. Last week, I talked with our client services team and our system development team. And so we're slowly propagating that message in a way that's conversational and interactive. And after we finish up with all those IT folks, we're planning on meeting with our president's executive team, the provost's office, and the deans and their college offices so that they have a chance to engage in these resources and critically think about how they might start implementing them in their areas and whether it's a good idea or not to start implementing them. In addition to those conversations, there is kind of a call to action because we want to gather feedback on how people are actually using these tools. It's not enough for us just to say they're out there, have fun, but we want to actually see what that reality looks like on the ground. So are staff using the tools? Why or why not? If they are using them, how are they being used? And an additional piece on our horizon, as we've been talking about, GPT-4 Omni, there will be a rush of anthropomorphized generative AI. That imitates humans and their emotional intonations. If you haven't looked at the OpenAI demo videos, I really would encourage you to kind of delve into those because it's scary the things, it's very cool, but also scary the things that they can do as an anthropomorphized generative AI model. And since I do have a captive audience, I'm going to give you my opinion on it. So generative AI tools are ubiquitous. Whether we like it or not, they are everywhere. If you're a Facebook user, you may have noticed a little Meta AI thing that's popped up in the corner of your app. If you're on Snapchat, you've had an AI chatbot in your application for a while. The other day, I opened a PDF online and I saw a little Adobe AI PDF reader that wasn't there the week before. So they're being pushed out into every corner of our digital landscapes. If nothing else, that push of advancement without your consent should really motivate you to building these resources. And while generative AI is scary good, it's only as good as the humans using it. So if we want our people to use it and to use it well, we have to have these conversations. We have to build these resources. They're not going to come to being AI experts on their own. We do need to help them along the way. In light of our missions as educational institutions, I definitely think employers are going to favor candidates who understand generative AI. That's just where the market is going. And so part of that starts with implementing it at our universities and with our staff. And universities, I think, have an obligation and a responsibility to provide this guidance to everyone, not just to students in the classroom and not just to our instructors, but also to the staff that are making the university run and doing a lot of work behind the scenes. And especially within the IT realm, there's a lot of opportunity to advance our processes and our service delivery with these tools, but not if we refuse to interact with them and not if we refuse to make these types of resources. And I do think with the looming enrollment cliff that we're all probably aware of, that students will become selective based on how institutions have integrated AI into their digital landscapes. Thomas Button mentioned that the average Amazon order takes 3 minutes from start to finish. How long does it take for your students to register for classes? I really do think that as a current student, I kind of see the difference between market solutions and companies that are integrating these tools and the institutions of higher ed that are very slow to adopt and creating a disparity between university life and the reality of school and what things are going to be like once you've graduated and you're working at a company that has all these tools at their disposal. So, if I can summarize all of this into a single metaphor, because I am an English major and I like a good metaphor, it would be to steer into the skid. I think we're all used to driving on wintry roads, and the only thing you can do to maintain some control when you hit a slick spot is steer into that skid. And this is not the same as uncritical adoption. We should be very, very critical in our adoption, but we can't be critical if we refuse to engage with the tools and the people that use them. There we go. So the masses are using generative AI. We've seen that with our purchasing habits at the university. We see it with students. We see it in social media. And they're going to use it more as the advancement occurs. I can't imagine how many more people are going to be coming to ChatGPT now that they have that Omni model, where you're not stuck with a keyboard. You can just open it up and start talking, and you're interacting with generative AI. So in order to keep up, in order to keep moving, we have to steer into that skid. And we are all passengers on that same road, whether we like it or not. And clarity follows action. So act now. A great time to start working on these things was, 6 months ago or a year ago, but the next best time is today, or maybe, Monday after we've had our fun and we're all back in the office. And that's really all that I have for you guys. So I hope that could be useful for you. I know it's still very much a work in progress, but if nothing else, take away from this talk the fact that we're still kind of in the thick of it. And as much as we've made, we still don't really know what we're doing more than anyone else. So what questions do you guys have? Yes, you, sir.
As you're presenting this, how are you balancing, you said spell things out or spell everything out versus wall text? Where do you find the balance?
I don't know if we found it just yet. Part of it is with the conversation. So when we set a meeting with a director of this area or that area and all of their people, I try to cater those talks to that area. So part of that includes like examples of how they might use Copilot or a chat-based tool in their area. But we're still early on in that process. So I don't have a great answer for you, but I think the more modalities you offer, whether that's just a website or just a video resource or just a conversation, if we can blend those, I think it makes it more approachable for the average end user. Any other questions? Yes, you in the back.
Has AI displaced anybody, any employees at WSU yet?
I don't think so. I know it's common to hear that AI isn't coming for your job, somebody using AI is. I also think the person who knows when not to use AI is coming for your job. And that kind of goes back to the critical adoption. It can't do everything, and there are things where I feel like my job is very secure because I've tried to use Copilot and ChatGPT, and the more I use it, the more dissatisfied I get. Because I'm an English major, I know how to write well, or I think I know how to write well. And so when I use a chatbot to generate that kind of content, I immediately see the flaws in it. But if we start hiring people where that's all they know how to do, and as much as I hate to say it, there are some areas of our campus that you can tell they're publishing ChatGPT generated stuff. So I think the critical adoption is key. You're not going to get displaced if you know when to use it and when not to use it. Does that answer your question? Any other questions? Yes?
As far as the policies and guidelines that you're currently producing, is it more backward-looking or is it more forward-looking? So we know that this year likely we'll see major advances in agent-like behavior become much more available across different platforms, or make it pretty easy for some arbitrary employee to develop an agent that actually interacts with the systems that they have access to. And so I'm wondering, how forward-looking are the guidelines and policies that you're providing?
So I think the policy has a good balance of looking back and looking forward. We're definitely looking back, especially at cyber incidents that have occurred and things that make the news about deep fakes and, for example, liability, like Air Canada being sued over what their chatbot has said. But we're also trying to balance that with looking forward to see, one, what is the enrollment cliff going to do? How does our innovation kind of drive the policy and allow more people to use it in a responsible way? But it's hard to be super forward-looking because there's not a lot of transparency. I think the best transparency rate that was cited by our keynote speaker was like 54%, and that makes it hard to know what is over that horizon. So
Part of the reason I ask, if you look at the time and commercialization is about 6 months. So if you want forward-looking, you really have to have someone paying attention to what is notable, what's likely to have a significant impact on commercial solutions in that 6-month window. So you really do have foresight if you're paying close attention. So, and there definitely are leading indicators about, for instance, we know that there should be a fairly significant bump in logic and reasoning that will open up a whole new class of problems that can be solved by generative AI. You know, we know that agent-based systems are just around the corner because of research that Apple recently released, because of research that Microsoft recently released. And so I'm just saying that you can have foresight at least 6 months in advance, and that could allow you to be proactive in providing guidance and addressing any policy concerns that might arise with solutions that will likely materialize in the near future.
And that is a very good point. One of the obstacles I think that's prevented us from looking as closely as we'd like to those, 6-month innovation levels is that ownership piece. There's no one person that's caring for generative AI at WSU, and there's no one who can do this full time. I have a day job teaching people how to, build a schedule of courses in Banner and enter, student information. So I think part of it is that investment that institutions need to make sure that personnel are able to be on the forefront of this and keep up and not do it as an afterthought or a secondary project, because that's been a huge limitation that I've experienced, is just the time of day and how much work it takes to find those answers.
And my follow-up question, as far as the policy that you've specifically developed, how much of it is actual policy versus just guidance? There's a big difference between those two things.
So because of the shared governance structure of the university, there is really not a specific generative AI policy in the books just yet. Most of what we are calling policy within that site is just guidelines and best practices that point to what we believe all of those shared governance processes will produce in the form of an official policy. So really we're referencing the state of Kansas policy that was released back in August of 2023, which is pretty vague. So that is kind of an institutional hurdle for us to get over. And if you guys get over that hurdle, please let me know how you do it, and I'll work that up the chain. But thank you. Any other questions, follow-ups? Yes.
So I think you said that for the road forward, you're still looking for feedback from staff about how they're using AI. But I'm curious if at this point you have any knowledge of what appetite there is for staff to be using generative AI, as well as what they might be using it for.
So I have been surprised in all the departmental talks that I've given. I ask how many people have used it before, not necessarily are currently using it, and it's usually maybe a third of the hands in the room go up. And that's within our IT departments. I really expected there to be more folks that were engaging with it. But use that kind of as an anecdote for you guys that it's probably not being used as much as you think it's being used. And it was hard for me to see that because, my nose has been up against it for months now. And there are lots of people that have been uncomfortable with it, and they're just unwilling to take that first step because there isn't an official policy on how they can use it or anything more than suggestions. I really don't know how much appetite there is. There are some people that are really, really excited about it and doing really cool things in their own sphere, but that doesn't translate across the institution. So I think it's still very, very slow to be adopted because people just don't know. And as much as we'd like to advertise it and say, hey, this is a really cool innovation we're providing you with, everyone who's getting that message has a day job that they have to care more about, whether that's, student advising or, paying bills for the university or whatnot. So for us, it can be, a specialty, but to them, it's just another tech thing that their IT person is yapping about. So, yes.
Who else is working on this with you? Or how many people?
So the project started back in December with our CIO, and he appointed our director of business technology to kind of head up everything, and they pulled me in to build the resource, since our training team does a lot of that. And then our director of business technology has since retired. She's actually retiring on the 24th of this month. So we have lost one of the people in that chain. And really it's me, the executive director of our Media Resource Center, and our director of the Office of Instructional Resources. But we haven't been really working in the same lanes because they're focusing much more on student and faculty implementation. We have, our system admins and our Windows team that's working on the Microsoft Copilot implementation, but they aren't as much collaborators as just, pieces of our infrastructure that kind of gatekeep what we can and can't do. So 2 people, essentially. Not as many as I'd like, but I think a lot of that is, again, the lack of ownership. Nobody has the authority to say, hey, I need you to start working on this. And so I'm hoping once we get some ownership established, we can get a larger team working on it. But yes, Dave.
Backing up one question, I found a way to sneak in the vegetables. So I built a Microsoft form and put an AI, put a Copilot hit behind it for people. I work in finance, and it allows people to ask how to build a complicated Excel form. And it actually goes out and hits Copilot, but they never know it. So I do less, they're happier, everybody wins.
So yeah, Dave Sprinkle is one of our fantastic users of generative AI that's finding really innovative ways to implement this technology, but he has a day job besides just doing ChatGPT stuff. So the more people that we can get involved and interested, the more momentum we can build and maintain as we move forward. Other questions, other thoughts? Is it time to go yet? Yes?
What are some of the ways you're trying to engage with people who are maybe too fearful to look into this further or talk about it even, or maybe people who think that this is a passing fad?
Really just conversations. If we can talk to our people about it and get them in the same room and show them this is what's available, this is what it can do, these are some of the things you can try that probably won't generate good results, and kind of take the onus on ourselves to engage with the technology and create an environment where they feel okay to use it. I think that's the best first step. I think we're going to try to make some, on-demand options or more video offerings that cover a wider range of uses, but there's still so many people that just haven't either had the interest or the courage to approach the tool and get to know it. So, and especially with how rapidly they're changing and advancing, I think that becomes much more necessary. So, yeah, just talk to your people, otherwise they're not going to know what's going on. Anything else? All right, well, you guys have...
That was a really great and interesting. I have like a whole list of things that I'd like to connect with you about.
Yes.
Afterwards, do you have your contact information?
I have a box of business cards over on that table. Please feel free to grab one as you go. I would love to hear from you guys what your institutions are doing, what hurdles you've run into, what opportunities we might have to collaborate and find cool new solutions. You guys have been a great audience. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your conference.